At 44, she drove Uber through the night, not for tips, but to survive. She was raising 3 boys alone, barely sleeping, barely standing. And then one night, a man got into her car, just another ride, until she told him she dropped out of college because she owed exactly $1,128. She thought it was just conversation, but what he did next would leave her sobbing in a parking lot and change her life forever. Nicole Harris didn't have time to complain. Every night, after feeding her kids, checking their homework, and making sure they were asleep, she'd slide into her old Toyota and start driving. The Uber app became her lifeline. For most riders, she was just another driver, polite, quiet, efficient. But for Nicole, it was survival. Every mile meant money, and every dollar had a destination: groceries, gas, rent, school shoes, overdue bills. She was 44 years old, a single mother of 3 boys, and the only thing heavier than her schedule was her silence. Because what most people didn't know, what she hardly dared to admit even to herself, was that Nicole used to be a college student. Years ago, when her boys were still in diapers and her life felt like it had a future, she enrolled at Georgia Central University. She wanted to study criminal justice. She dreamed of becoming a probation officer, maybe even starting a program for young offenders, especially boys who reminded her of her sons. She wasn't trying to get rich. She just wanted to make a difference. But then came the roadblock. Nicole remembered the moment like a scar. She was trying to register for the new semester when the screen flashed red. A balance of $1,128. Unpaid fees. Until that number went away, her account would stay frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen. There was cereal to pour, laundry to fold, rent to catch up on. That number followed her for years, $1,128, haunting her like a ghost. Not thousands, not tuition for a whole year, just enough to stop everything. By 2018, college was a faded memory. Now she was driving late nights across Atlanta, picking up strangers, listening to their music, their small talk, their silence. She didn't share her story anymore, not unless someone asked. And then came one rainy night. It was just after a soccer match at the city stadium. Traffic was a mess. Nicole picked up a clean-cut man in a navy blazer and a Georgia Tech scarf. His name on the app said Daniel Carter. He looked like he'd had a long day. Tired eyes, quiet energy. At first, the ride was like any other. Directions, traffic, small talk. But then Daniel asked how long she'd been driving. Nicole smiled and said, "Too long." Something about his voice, maybe the way he asked without judgment, made her say more than she usually did. She told him about her kids, about working 2 jobs. And then, as if she was saying it just to herself, she mentioned college, how she dropped out, how she never got to go back, and how it all came down to a balance of a little over $1,100. Daniel didn't say much. He just nodded, not awkwardly, not with pity, just with presence. When they pulled up to his stop, he thanked her, left a generous tip through the app, and disappeared into the rain. Nicole didn't think about him again. She'd had hundreds of riders, thousands. People talk, people listen, people leave. But what she didn't know was that Daniel Carter wasn't just listening. He had heard everything. And 2 weeks later, Nicole's phone would ring with a call that would drop her to her knees. 2 weeks, 14 days, hundreds of rides. Nicole Harris barely remembered the man in the navy blazer, the one with the Georgia Tech scarf, Daniel Carter. She remembered that he'd tipped well, that he'd listened, that he hadn't looked away when she got vulnerable, something most people did the second she mentioned struggle. But mostly, she forgot him, because survival doesn't leave space for fairy tales. And then, on a Tuesday morning, Nicole's phone rang while she was folding her son's laundry. She almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, but something in her gut told her to pick up. "Hi, is this Ms. Nicole Harris?" "Yes. This is the registrar's office at Georgia Central University." Her breath caught. "We're calling with some good news. Your outstanding balance has been fully paid. You're now eligible to re-register for the upcoming semester." Nicole stared at the floor. The phone slipped from her ear for a moment. "Ma'am? Ms. Harris? Are you still there?" She managed to whisper, I didn't make a payment." The woman on the phone sounded cheerful. "Well, someone did. It was made anonymously, but I assure you, the amount was exact, $1,128. You're clear to return." Nicole dropped to her knees, right there in the middle of her tiny apartment. Socks still warm from the dryer scattered across the floor. She cried so hard her chest hurt, not because of the money, but because someone had seen her. Someone believed in her enough to erase the wall that had blocked her for years. And then, she remembered. The car ride. The man. Daniel. No one else knew the exact amount. No one else knew how deeply that number haunted her. Later that day, she opened her phone and scrolled through her ride history. She found the trip. His name. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. Should she message him? Should she ask? Before she could decide, a message popped in. From Daniel Carter. No emojis. No dramatic punctuation. Just a quiet note. Sometimes the road just needs to be cleared. I hope you drive yours all the way to the end. That was all it took. Nicole re-registered the same night. She scheduled her classes around her Uber shifts. She started studying during breaks, recording lectures and replaying them between pickups. The exhaustion was unreal. There were nights she forgot to eat, mornings she woke up in the car in her driveway because she'd fallen asleep before going inside. But she refused to stop, because now her kids weren't just watching her hustle. They were watching her heal. And then, something happened that Nicole didn't see coming. Just a few weeks before graduation, she got another call. But this time, it wasn't the school. It was a local news station. Someone had tipped them off. They knew her story. They knew about the debt, the degree, and the anonymous donor. And they weren't the only ones watching. Because someone else, someone from her past, had seen the story too. And they were about to come forward with something she never expected. May 6, 2021. It was the kind of spring day that felt too big for a calendar. The auditorium at Georgia Central University buzzed with families, balloons, flowers, and the sound of names echoing from the stage. Somewhere in that sea of celebration, Nicole Harris adjusted her cap and clutched the edge of her gown. Her heart pounded. Her hands trembled. She wasn't nervous about walking across the stage. She was afraid to believe it was real. Behind her were years of struggle, late shifts, missed meals, sleepless nights, that cursed $1,128. Ahead of her was everything she had once given up on. Nicole peered out into the crowd from the edge of the stage. Her 3 sons sat in the front row, dressed in button-downs and glowing with pride. Her youngest waved wildly, barely able to stay in his seat. Behind them, her mother cried silently into a tissue. But what made Nicole freeze was the sight of Daniel Carter, the quiet man in the navy blazer. He was sitting halfway back, away from the crowd, hands clasped, smiling gently. Nicole's breath caught. The MC called her name, and for the first time in her life, the crowd applauded her, not for being strong or responsible or holding everything together, but for finishing, for achieving, for rising. As she walked across the stage, tassels swinging beside her face, Nicole's vision blurred. She couldn't see the cameras, couldn't hear the music. All she could see was every night she almost gave up and didn't. After the ceremony, cameras swarmed her. The story had gotten out. A local news crew asked about the anonymous donation, about the mysterious man who helped her return to school, about what she planned to do next. Nicole gave credit to her children, her professors, her late-night car rides, her own stubborn will. And then she looked into the camera and smiled. To whoever believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, thank you. And somewhere in the back of that crowd, Daniel turned to leave. Quietly, no spotlight, no thanks needed. But that wasn't the end. Because as Nicole was gathering her things, a woman approached her. Mid-50s, dressed in a church-style navy dress, tears already in her eyes. "Are you Nicole Harris?" Nicole nodded. The woman pulled out a folded letter. "My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm Daniel's mother." Nicole blinked, confused. Evelyn continued, "My son passed away in March. Cancer. Very sudden. But before he went, he told me about you. He told me he met a woman who reminded him what courage looked like. He said if anything ever happened to him, he wanted to make sure you knew, that you were the reason he left this world hopeful." Nicole couldn't move. The letter Evelyn handed her was handwritten. Just one page. It ended with, "Don't stop, because someone else will need you the way you needed me. The world needs more Nicoles." Nicole broke down. Right there in her cap and gown, diploma in hand, future wide open. She realized this wasn't just a graduation. It was a passing of the torch. She wasn't just a mother with a degree. She was now the stranger who would show up when someone else was ready to quit. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotionally powerful stories that will restore your faith in humanity.